I am over 60 years old, a widow, and I thought I only had this ranch left. When my only son died, his cold wife announced she would sell the land and throw me out. But at the will reading, one simple sentence triggered a legal trap my late husband had set. My name is Margaret Harlow, but most folks just call me Maggie. I am 62 years old, living alone out here on Harlow Ridge, the land my family has worked outside Willow Creek, Colorado, for longer than I have been alive. The morning had started with the thin, cold quiet of the high country. The sun was just cutting across the east pasture when the phone rang, splitting the peace. It was Vanessa. Her voice was glass. Maggie, I'm at Westview. Daniel had a complication after the surgery. He had a stroke. He's gone. Just like that. My son, my only son, gone. The phone felt heavy, suddenly slick in my hand. He was dead. After they told us the heart procedure was a complete success, just routine. The kitchen tilted. I braced myself against the counter, my mind scrambling back, trying to find purchase. I just saw Daniel 3 days ago, before they admitted him. He was vibrant, chafing at the boring pre-op instructions. He squeezed my hand. Hard. We talked about the plans to expand the herd, about the renovations on the main house. He was finally going to finish the new wing. Mum, you won't have to haul wood for that old stove another winter, he'd promised, his eyes bright. We're moving you in with us. Maggie, are you listening? Vanessa's voice sliced through the memory, impatient. I tried to ask what happened, what the doctors said, how this could be. Look, I don't have time to go over it. She snapped. The sound wasn't grief. It was annoyance. All the hospital procedures, the funeral arrangements, the insurance, it has all been handled by me. I just need you to come down to the hospital, sign a few papers, and then we can get you out of here as soon as possible. I listened, really listened, past the words. There was no tremor, no sudden intake of breath. Underneath that brittle control, I heard something I could not name. It was the sound of a lock clicking open. It was relief. I did not bother to change out of my jeans. I grabbed the keys to the old pickup, the metal cold against my palm. The engine turned over, coughing in the thin air. The drive to Westview Medical is nearly 40 minutes. 40 minutes where my mind kept spinning on the same argument, the one we'd been having for 6 months. Vanessa, always pushing, always talking about Suncrest development and the fortune they'd offered for Harlow Ridge. It's wasted land. Maggie, she'd said just last month, her city nails tapping on my oak table. It's just sitting here. People want resorts, not hayfields. Daniel was always stuck in the middle, torn between the legacy he loved and the wife he wanted to please. When I reached the hospital, the lobby felt sterile and too bright. I went to the cardiac floor, my boots echoing on the polished tile. A nurse at the station saw me, and her face softened with practiced pity. Mrs. Harlow, I am so sorry. I need to see him, I said. My voice sounded rusty. I need to see my son. She winced, dropping her eyes to the counter. Ma'am? His wife? Mrs. Vanessa Harlow. She already signed the release. His body was transferred directly to Silver Pines Funeral Home. It was her legal decision as next of kin. I was not allowed to see my own son. Vanessa found me by the elevators as I stood there, frozen. She was immaculate in a smart black pantsuit, her makeup perfect. Not a single smudge of mascara. She looked like she was closing a business deal. Vanessa, I grabbed her arm. What happened? I want to talk to the doctor. I don't understand. She pulled her arm away, smoothing the expensive fabric. Maggie, this isn't the time. It was a stroke. It happens. It's done. I have to meet with the lawyers and the insurance people right now. There is a lot of paperwork. She started to walk away, then paused, looking back at me as if I were a loose end, a piece of old furniture she had to deal with. You know, she said, almost to herself, now that it's just me on the title, everything will be so much simpler. That one word, simpler. It hit me harder than the news of his death. My son was gone, his body not even cold, and her first thought was simpler property titles. Something cold and sharp woke up inside me. Before I married, before Daniel, I spent 20 years as a records clerk at the Willow Creek County Courthouse. I know paperwork. I know titles, and deeds, and probate. And I know the look of someone who thinks they just got away with something. I don't remember the drive home. That night, I sat in the old log house, the silence of the ridge pressing in until my ears rang. The grief was a physical weight, a stone in my chest threatening to crush me. I finally let the tears come, hot and angry. I went to my late husband's desk, the one he built himself from pine off this ridge. He was a good lawyer, a smart, quiet man who knew the law and the land. I pulled open the deep bottom drawer, my fingers tracing his neat files, his solid handwriting. And then I remembered something he'd told me years ago, after a dispute with a neighbour over water rights. He had smiled, tapping the thick vellum of his own will. Maggie, he'd said. I put one sentence in there, just one. If you ever remember it, it will protect you. It will protect this land from anyone at all, who tries to take it from you. The funeral was held at Silver Pines Funeral Home, a place that always smelled faintly of lilies and furniture polish. Vanessa had arranged everything. I mean, everything. She chose the bland, instrumental music that piped through the chapel, the towering sprays of white roses that looked cold and stiff, and the list of speakers. She had not asked me once what music Daniel loved, which hymns his father and I used to sing, or which of his old ranch friends he would have wanted to speak for him. I found my name on a small, embossed card placed on a chair in the second row. The entire front row was reserved for Vanessa's friends from the city, women with sharp haircuts and expensive shoes who glanced back at me, my worn black dress, and my work-roughened hands. Their looks were clear. I was the old country woman, the relic they had to tolerate. When Vanessa stepped up to the podium, she dabbed her eyes with a tissue, right on cue. She spoke of her perfect, whirlwind romance with Daniel, painting a picture of a man I barely recognized, a man whose only goal was, apparently, to make her happy and escape his rural roots. Then, she delivered the real message, the one intended for the investors in the room. Daniel and I had such grand plans for the future, she said, her voice catching with manufactured emotion. We were going to finally develop that beautiful, but wasteful, piece of land. We were going to transform Harlow Ridge into a modern, vibrant resort for everyone to enjoy. I felt the blood drain from my face. She stood over my son's casket, and she lied. She completely erased Daniel's actual promise, his promise to me, his father's memory, that Harlow Ridge would remain intact. She did not mention the generations of Harlows who bled into that soil, the seasons we'd fought drought and blizzards, the legacy he was, Just last week. So proud of. She turned his heritage into a wasteful piece of land. After the service, as people milled around awkwardly, Vanessa made her way to me. She moved through the crowd, accepting condolences, her face a perfect mask of the grieving widow. In front of everyone, she wrapped her arms around me in a show of shared sorrow. It was a cold, stiff embrace. She leaned in, her cheek brushing mine, her perfume sharp. "After the will is read," she whispered, her voice suddenly stripped of all performance, hard as granite. "You will have to leave the land. I am not planning to subsidize someone who just wants to sit on dead earth." The shock of it nearly buckled my knees. I pulled back, but I kept my voice low, level. I would not give her the satisfaction of a scene in front of her polished friends. "Vanessa," I said, just as quietly, "you seem to forget. That land is still held jointly. Daniel and me. Any transfer requires my signature." I saw it, just for a second. A flash of pure, hot anger in her eyes before she masked it, stepping back and nodding sadly to a sympathetic onlooker. As if I had just said something senile and cruel. I needed air. I moved toward the hallway and a hand touched my elbow. It was Jonah, one of Daniel's oldest friends from high school, a man I hadn't seen in years. He looked worried, his face pale. "Maggie," he whispered, pulling me into a small alcove away from the crowd. "I don't know if it's my place, but Dan was real stressed lately. He called me a few weeks back. He was talking about some secret contract Vanessa had him looking at. Something with a big real estate firm. He said he felt like he was being gamed. Trapped." "Gamed?" I asked. "Yeah. He just said he was trying to fix it. Please, be careful. Maggie." Before he could say more, I saw the funeral director begin to close the doors to the main chapel. I hurried back, needing one last moment, one last look at my son's face. But as I reached the casket, a young man in a dark suit stepped politely in my way. "I'm sorry, Mum. I just want to see him," I pleaded. "I wasn't at the hospital. The organizer of the service has requested the casket remain closed from this point forward," he said, his eyes avoiding mine. The organizer. Vanessa. I stepped back, defeated, blinking against the sudden, stinging tears. I glanced toward the small family office at the end of the hall, its door slightly ajar. Through the frosted glass, I saw Vanessa. She was not crying. She was talking animatedly to a man I didn't recognize, someone tall in an expensive grey suit. As I watched, she smiled a real smile, wide and bright, and she shook his hand. It was the handshake of a deal just closed, of a victory won. That image burned itself into my mind. I turned and walked out of Silver Pine's funeral home, past the lilies and the sad music. The suspicion I'd felt in the hospital lobby was now a cold, hard certainty. I was done being the grieving mother. I was done being the old woman in the second row. My 20 years at the county courthouse taught me how to follow a paper trail. I know how land deals work, how insurance policies are written, and how hospital records are kept. The will reading was scheduled for next week. That is where it would begin. Vanessa wanted a war over this land. She had no idea what kind of fight I was prepared to give her. The law offices of Carter and Langley were on the main street in Willow Creek, in the old brick building with the dark wood trim. It was my late husband's firm, and the conference room felt heavy with his memory. Eleanor Carter, his partner for 30 years, sat at the head of the long, polished mahogany table. The chairs were arranged facing her, stiff and formal. It felt less like a reading and more like a small, private sentencing. I sat on one side, my hands folded in my lap. On the other side, radiating confidence, sat Vanessa. Next to her was the man from the funeral home, the one in the sharp grey suit. He introduced himself as Bryce Keller, a representative from Suncrest Development. His presence in this room, at my son's will reading, was a physical insult. Eleanor adjusted her glasses, her hands resting on the thick vellum envelope. Before she could break the seal, Vanessa stood up, placing her palms flat on the gleaming wood. "Eleanor, before you start," she announced, her voice ringing with false brightness, "I just want to let everyone know, to save us all some time, that Daniel signed a new will. A more recent one, obviously. He left everything to me, his wife. All assets, the land, everything." She then turned to me, her smile tight with condescension. "Mrs. Harlow will, of course, be provided with a stipend for 6 months to allow her adequate time to find new living arrangements." Bryce Keller inspected his cuticles, looking bored. "At which point," he added, his voice smooth and disinterested, "Suncrest will proceed with the purchase of the property, as planned. We appreciate Vanessa's practical approach in moving past this sentimental attachment. It's time to stop clinging to old-fashioned ideals, Mrs. Harlow. I was not a person. I was a sentimental attachment. I was an obstacle to be managed with a 6-month stipend." Eleanor Carter let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. She stared at Vanessa over the rim of her glasses. "Ms. Harlow," she said, her voice dry as old paper. "I have in my possession one, and only one, validly executed last will and testament for Daniel Harlow. It was signed in this office, notarized, and witnessed by myself and my clerk, just 2 months ago. I have no other amendments. I have no other superseding documents in my file." Vanessa's smile faltered, a small flicker of confusion in her eyes. She remained standing as Eleanor broke the seal. The room was suffocatingly quiet. Eleanor began to read through the standard legal introductory phrases. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull, painful beat. "And as to the disposition of my estate," Eleanor read, "I bequeath all my property, real and personal, including my full interest in the property known as Harlow Ridge, all active insurance policies, and my shares in the Green Spur Co., to my mother, Margaret Harlow." The air shattered. "No." Vanessa's voice was a shriek. "That is impossible, he wouldn't you." She jabbed a finger at me, her face twisting. "You manipulated him. You took advantage of him when he was sick." She turned back to the lawyer. "Stop reading. This is a fraud. I have a newer will." Eleanor did not pause. She simply raised her voice, her eyes remaining fixed on the document. "This bequest is subject to the following condition. Article 4. She read the next words slowly, each one landing like a gavel strike. "Any individual, under any name or pretext, who engages in actions, directly or indirectly, seeking to force my mother, Margaret Harlow, from Harlow Ridge, or seeking to transfer the land against her will, shall be deemed to have automatically forfeited all inheritance and all benefits from my estate." Eleanor Carter finally looked up. She looked first at Vanessa, then at Bryce Keller, whose smooth expression had frozen. "What this clause means, in plain English," Eleanor said, Is that any documented attempt by any party to expel Mrs. Harlow from her home, or any contract made contingent upon that expulsion, could trigger a complete and total disinheritance? It would apply to any assets, regardless of which will one was attempting to probate. Bryce Keller went utterly silent. His professional mask was gone, replaced by the pale, cold look of a man who just saw $1 million deal evaporate. Vanessa was trembling, her face a blotchy, furious red. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "No, you can't." She lunged across the table, her hands grasping for the will, trying to tear it from Eleanor's grasp. Eleanor, quicker than I could have imagined, snatched the document away, holding it against her chest. "That will not help you, Vanessa." And in that moment, as Vanessa stood there, panting, defeated and exposed, I heard my husband's voice as clearly as if he were in the room. One sentence. "Maggie, it will protect you." It was not a shield. It was a trap, a legal landmine, carefully constructed by a brilliant lawyer and a son who saw the truth. And Vanessa, blinded by greed, had just spent the last 2 weeks telling everyone, including me, exactly how she planned to stomp right on it. I walked out of Eleanor's office into the sharp afternoon air, my legs unsteady. Vanessa caught up to me just as I reached the pickup truck in the parking lot. Her face was a mottled, ugly red. "You won't get away with this, you manipulative old hag," she hissed, her voice low and venomous so the few people passing by could not hear. "I will sue you. I will drag this through every court in Colorado. That land is mine." I turned, my hand flat on the cold metal of the truck door. "Is that so, Vanessa?" I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Then, like you said, we'll let it be settled. On paper. And in front of a judge." The next morning, I was at the Willow Creek County Courthouse. The building smelled of old paper, floor wax, and the faint, dusty scent of finalized decisions. Ruth, who had worked the records desk with me for 15 years before I retired, looked up when I walked in. Her eyes, usually sharp and discerning, softened with genuine sympathy. "Maggie, Lord, I was so sorry to hear about Daniel. It's just awful." "Thank you." "Ruth," I said, leaning on the high counter that I had stood behind for 2 decades. "I'm not here for condolences today. I'm here as a researcher. I need the public file on Harlow Ridge. All of it. I need to see any recent liens, any mortgage adjustments, any contracts or options filed against it. Specifically anything listing Suncrest Development, and I need to see the probate filings for Daniel's life insurance." Ruth's professional mask slipped right on. She knew my researcher tone. She tapped at her keyboard, her movements efficient and familiar. She printed the standard public filings mortgage info, the original deed. But then, she glanced around the empty records room, lowered her voice, and slid another document from under her desk blotter. "This isn't officially public, Maggie," she whispered. "It was filed by Suncrest's lawyers by mistake, then immediately retracted. But not before I saw it. It was a memorandum of intent, signed by Vanessa Harlow and Bryce Keller. I scanned the dense legal jargon until my eyes landed on the critical clause. Suncrest's multi-million-dollar offer was explicitly conditional. They would only proceed with the purchase. It stated, if the property was delivered free and clear of all occupants, specifically, any resident holding right of habitation. My breath caught. It was the trigger, in black and white. Vanessa's signature, dated 3 weeks before Daniel even went into the hospital. That night, I found Jonah at the Rusty Spur, a local bar that smelled of stale beer and sawdust. He looked relieved to see me, pulling me into a quiet booth. "Maggie, thank God you called," he said, his hands wrapped around a bottle. "That funeral, it felt all wrong. Look, I wasn't making it up. Daniel told me, straight up. He changed his will. He said Vanessa was obsessed with the Suncrest deal, and he had to make sure you were bulletproof. That was his word." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. But there was more. Maggie. He was scared. He said he was about to expose something bigger, that it wasn't just about the land anymore. He said Vanessa and that Suncrest guy were into something. He used the word illegal. He had proof. He was supposed to show me what it was, but he never got the chance. Bulletproof. The word echoed in my head. Eleanor Carter was a fine family lawyer, but this was twisting into something far darker. This was fraud. I called Ruth back the next day. "Ruth, I need a shark," I said. "Who is the meanest, smartest land and probate litigator you know? Someone Vanessa's expensive city lawyers won't be able to push around." Ruth didn't hesitate. "Tessa Monroe. She's young, but she's a bulldog. She's in the next county over, but she's the one you want." I met Tessa Monroe 2 days later. Her office was all glass and steel, a world away from Willow Creek. She looked barely 30, with sharp, intelligent eyes and an energy that vibrated with impatience. As I laid out the story, I saw the familiar look of dismissal. Just another messy family squabble over a will. Then, I showed her the will. I tapped Article 4, the forfeiture clause. Her impatient drumming on the desk stopped. Finally, I handed her the memorandum of intent Ruth had given me. Tessa read it, then read the will again. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. It was not a nice smile. "Well, hello there," she murmured. She looked up at me, and for the first time, I saw an ally. "Mrs. Harlow, this isn't a family dispute. This smells like large-scale, premeditated fraud." She leaned back in her chair, her eyes suddenly electric. "Your daughter-in-law doesn't get it. That clause isn't just a shield. It's a weapon. If we can prove a systematic plan by Vanessa to force you from the land, which this document explicitly outlines as the entire basis for her deal, the clause not only disinherits her, it completely invalidates her standing. It makes any contract she signed with Suncrest worthless. We can blow up their whole deal." The relief was so strong I nearly wept. Tessa became all business, pulling out a legal pad. "Okay, Maggie. We need everything. A complete list. Daniel's entire medical history from Westview, the insurance policies, treatment logs. But more importantly, we need discovery. We need every email, text message, and phone log between Vanessa and Bryce Keller. We need her bank statements. We need the financials for Harlow Ridge and the Green Spur Co. We have to build the systematic plan brick by brick." "How do we get those?" I asked. "She'll fight us at every step." "We don't ask her," Tessa said, already dialing her phone. "We hire Leo Kingsley. He's an ex-cop, now a forensic data and financial investigator. He specializes in finding money and messages people try to hide. He'll dig without her ever seeing the shovel." That night, I drove back to Harlow Ridge. The sun was setting, bleeding purple and orange across the peaks, painting the long grass in the west pasture. I got out of the truck and just stood there, breathing in the cold, clean, pine-scented air of my home. This land was in my bones. It held my husband's memory and my son's legacy. "You want this land," I whispered to the wind. "Fine. But first, I am going to take every single one of your masks." Leo Kingsley, the investigator, was fast. His first report landed on Tessa's desk less than a week later. He had started with the money, and while Vanessa's main accounts were exactly what you would expect, he found the artery, a secondary account, opened 4 months ago, in Vanessa's name only. From this account, regular, substantial payments were being transferred to a shell corporation, a limited liability company I had never heard of, Ridgeview Consulting. Tessa was energized when she called me, her voice sharp. Ridgeview Consulting has no website, no listed business address other than a post office box, and its registered agent is a law firm notorious for handling Suncrest Development's land acquisitions. This isn't a payment, Maggie. This is a payoff. Suncrest was paying Vanessa, under the table, to lobby her own husband, to get him to sell his family's land. That was dirty. But the next discovery was sickening. Ruth, my old colleague at the courthouse, had a friend in the billing department at Westview Medical. She managed to get me a copy of Daniel's fully itemized inpatient charges. I brought the stack of papers to Tessa. She spread the pages across her glass desk, her finger tracing the lines of codes. Here. Daniel was admitted under the Comprehensive Cardiac Care Package. Top of the line. Excellent choice. Fully covered by his insurance. Her finger stopped, tapping a line item dated the day after his admission. And here, Vanessa, using her medical power of attorney, authorized a change in service. She downgraded him. Maggie. She moved him to the standard observation package. She declined the specialist post-operative consultations and cut the secondary diagnostic checks. It saved. She flipped a page. Just under $4,000. I gripped the edge of the chair. But the insurance covered the better one. It did, Tessa said, her voice quiet but cold. She was saving money. Her money. She was the beneficiary on his primary insurance, and she was pinching pennies on his life. I stared at the dates. The first payment from Ridgeview Consulting had arrived in her account almost the same day she argued with Daniel about the unnecessary expense of the surgery. Leo's next report focused on data. He had subpoenaed her phone location records. At the funeral, Vanessa had made a performance of telling people how she never left his bedside, not for 1 second. Leo's report showed that during the crucial 8 hours Daniel was in surgery and recovery, the hours where complications were most likely, her phone was not at Westview Medical. Her phone pinged for nearly 4 hours at the Grand Willow Hotel downtown. She had not been alone. Leo, being thorough, had cross-referenced the hotel's registry. Bryce Keller had a corporate room registered there for that exact afternoon. Tessa began to build the timeline on a whiteboard, the marker squeaking in the quiet room. The date. Daniel secretly changed his will. The first payment to Ridgeview. The hotel meeting. The downgrade of medical care. And then the texts Leo had pulled from her cloud backup. She had been sloppy, complaining to a friend about how stubborn Daniel was being, how she was so ready for this cash out. And then, the one that made Tessa pause and slide the printout across the desk to me. Her friend had apparently asked what would happen to me, the old woman on the ridge. Vanessa's reply, time stamped just 3 days before my son died. When that land is finally ours, the old woman will just have to hit the road. It is time for Harlow Ridge to stop being a useless museum. Tessa looked at me, her eyes devoid of pity, replaced by a cold, tactical focus. "There it is," she said softly, tapping the message. "She will have to hit the road." That is the literal fulfillment of Article 4. Seeking to force my mother from Harlow Ridge. She just handed us the case. Maggie. I felt a strange, cold calm settle over me. The grief was still there, a heavy stone, but now it was surrounded by pure, hard ice. Tessa pushed another document toward me. "This is the petition for a temporary injunction. I'm filing it this afternoon. It freezes the asset. It legally stops Vanessa, Suncrest, or anyone else from selling, transferring, or borrowing against Harlow Ridge until this dispute is settled by a judge. We are paralyzing them." My hand did not shake as I signed my name. The injunction must have hit their desks the next morning, because it sent Bryce Keller into a panic. He clearly decided Vanessa was no longer a reliable asset. That evening, a silver Mercedes I did not recognize crunched up my long gravel driveway. Bryce Keller got out, straightening his expensive suit. He looked arrogant and annoyed, like a man forced to clean up a mess himself. "Mrs. Harlow," he called out, not waiting for me to invite him onto the porch. "This has all been a significant misunderstanding. This legal situation. It's emotional, and it's unnecessary." "Is it?" I said. He manufactured a thin smile. "Suncrest Development is prepared to be extremely generous to ensure your comfort and cooperation. We want to clear this up. Quietly. We are prepared to offer you a private, separate check. $250,000, cash. You sign a quitclaim deed, and we all move on." He thought I was just some grieving old woman holding out for a better offer. He thought my home, my son's memory, my entire life, had a price he could pay in cash. I looked at him, this city man standing on the land my great-grandfather had broken his back to clear. I let the silence stretch, filled only by the wind moving through the pines. "No." He stared at me. He was not used to that word. "Get off my land, Mr. Keller." For the first time since I met him, Bryce Keller looked genuinely unsettled. My refusal to Bryce Keller was an act of war I had not fully calculated. 2 days later, a county sheriff's deputy, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, drove up to the house and served me with court papers. Vanessa was suing me. I read the allegations standing on my own porch, the paper trembling in my hand. Elder abuse, undue influence over Daniel's will, and the one that showed Suncrest's hand, tortious interference with an economic contract. She was claiming I had illegally destroyed her deal. I drove the papers straight to Tessa's office. She read the summons, a short, sharp laugh escaping her lips. "This is standard," she said, though her eyes were cold. "It's the Darvo strategy: deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. She's not trying to win on merits. Maggie. She's trying to paint you as the villain, bury you in legal fees, and exhaust you until you sign the land over just to make it stop. It's a war of attrition." The lawsuit was only the beginning. The real attack was on my name. Vanessa launched a full-scale assault on social media, a battlefield I barely understood. She posted beautiful, filtered photos of Daniel, writing long, agonizing posts about her stolen future. Then she posted pictures of me, grainy ones of the old log house, painting me as a mentally unstable recluse, a hoarder of dead memories who was bitterly clinging to the past. She invented stories whole cloth. She told her followers that I had been a controlling mother, that I had forbidden Daniel from leaving the ranch, that I had tried to sabotage their marriage from day one. In a town the size of Willow Creek, that kind of gossip is poison. It spread fast. I felt the stares in the feed store. I saw old neighbors, people I'd known for 30 years, suddenly avoid my aisle at the market. It was a profound, suffocating isolation. But for every person who turned away, a quiet message would appear on my phone. An old friend from the courthouse. "We know you, Maggie. Don't let that city witch get to you." "I have to respond," I told Tessa, my voice shaking with anger. "She is lying about my son." "Absolutely not," Tessa commanded. "That's exactly what she wants. You don't engage. You don't argue with her online. You save it. You screenshot every single post, every comment, every threat. You send it all to me. She thinks she's just venting. What she's doing is building our case for malicious intent." But the digital threats soon became physical. I was reading by the fire late one night. The ridge wrapped in silence. A sharp crack echoed across the valley, shocking me to my feet. A rifle shot. Too close. My heart hammered. A second crack, and I heard the metallic ping as the bullet struck the old steel gate at the end of my driveway. I dropped to the floor, my hands shaking. I waited until I heard the sound of a truck engine fading down the highway. I was terrified, but that fear was quickly hardening into a cold, diamond-hard rage. I called the county sheriff. I insisted they come out, that they file a report. The deputy found the note, tacked to the gatepost right below the bullet mark. "You should leave while you still can." Leo Kingsley was at my house the next morning. He was grim. "This isn't Vanessa," he said, unpacking equipment. "This is Suncrest. This is Bryce Keller, or his hired hands, trying to intimidate his sentimental attachment. They're sloppy." He installed a network of small, motion-activated cameras in the pines overlooking my drive and the porch. He then told me he'd taken a precaution. "Keller has been at the courthouse twice this week to meet with Vanessa's lawyers. He parks in the public garage," Leo said. It was easy enough to attach a small GPS tracker under the bumper of his Mercedes. Let's see who he's meeting with after dark. The pressure was mounting from all sides, but Vanessa reserved the cruelest blow for herself. She sent me an email, not from a lawyer, but from her personal account. It was long, filled with twisted sentiments about grief. "If you truly loved Daniel," she wrote, "if you have any respect for his memory, you will stop this pathetic fight. You will sign the land over. Daniel would be ashamed in heaven. Maggie, knowing his own mother was the one destroying the legacy he was trying to build for us." That nearly did it. The accusation struck me in the heart, right where the grief for Daniel lived. Destroying his legacy. I sat at my kitchen table, the deputy's report on one side and Vanessa's email on the other. I was just one 62-year-old woman. I was tired. My son was gone, and I was fighting a corporation and a monster. The fight suddenly felt too big. As I sat there, staring at the wall, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. I glanced at the caller ID Westview Medical. I picked it up. "Hello? Mrs.? Harlow. This is Dr. Harris, Daniel's surgeon." His voice was low, professional, but tight with a strange anxiety. "I am sorry to call you directly. I've been reviewing your son's file. His outcome. It's been bothering me. It shouldn't have happened that way. I've been going over the charts again, and I found something in his post-operative medication logs. A detail. It just doesn't add up. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a sudden, electric chill. I called Tessa and Leo. We met at Tessa's office an hour later. Tessa listened to my account of the call, her expression hardening. She looked at Leo, then at me. "All right," she said, her voice quiet but decisive. "We've been fighting a defensive war over a piece of land. It's time to change the battlefield. Leo, I want you to shift your primary focus to Westview Medical. We are no longer just investigating a probate dispute. We are opening a new, parallel investigation into the death of Daniel Harlow. We need to find out, definitively, if his death was a natural complication, or if it was an acceleration." We met Dr. Harris in a small, windowless conference room in the hospital's administrative wing. He looked exhausted, his eyes haunted. He had brought Tessa and me in through a back entrance. "Thank you for coming," he said, his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "I'm putting my career on the line, but I can't sleep. Daniel's death, it was too fast. The stroke was massive, yes, but given his vitals just an hour before, it felt wrong. I've been reviewing his chart every day." He slid a file across the table. "A new travelling nurse, one who wasn't intimidated by Mrs. Vanessa Harlow, started last week. She was reviewing inactive charts, and she flagged this. It's an order from the day Daniel died. For his anticoagulant. The dosage was doubled." Tessa leaned forward. "A doctor made a mistake. That's the problem. Dr. Harris said, his voice dropping. "I didn't make that order. I was in a 7-hour bypass surgery in the next OR. The electronic chart shows the order was authenticated. It was entered using the login credentials assigned to Vanessa as the authorized medical guardian for his care. She had access to the floor's system via a patient family portal." Tessa was silent for a long moment. Processing. "Doctor, this could be a catastrophic system error," she said carefully. "Or it could be the trail of deliberate, malicious interference. We must be extremely cautious. This moves us out of civil court and into the jurisdiction of the district attorney." I felt the room grow cold. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. It was one thing to fight a greedy woman for land. It was another thing entirely to face this. The horrifying, unspeakable idea that Vanessa, that she didn't just let him die, or save money on his care, but that she might have actively pushed him to get the insurance money, to make the Suncrest deal simpler. The air in my lungs turned to poison. Leo did not wait for the hospital's permission. He went to the Rusty Spur, the same bar where I met Jonah. He knew one of the cardiac nurses, a woman who worked long hours, drank hard, and hated hospital politics. He reported back to Tessa and me the next day. "The nurse remembers Vanessa well," Leo said, his voice flat, all business. "She said Vanessa was unbelievably difficult. The day before Daniel died, Dr. Harris had him moved to the intensive step-down unit, a more expensive, higher monitoring package, just as a precaution. The nurse said Vanessa came to the station and demanded he be put back on the old one. She said the new care was unnecessary and a waste. The hospital, getting wind of Dr. Harris's internal inquiries, reacted exactly as Tessa predicted. Their legal department called her, offering a private, confidential discussion to resolve any concerns the Harlow family might have. Tessa's reply was immediate and brutal. "There will be no discussion," she told their lawyer over the speakerphone, her voice like ice. We will be filing for full discovery. If you obstruct, we will file for a court order. We want every second of hallway camera footage from the cardiac floor for the 3 days Daniel was there. And we want the complete, unredacted system logs. All of them. Now. Faced with a public malpractice suit that could expose their system's vulnerabilities, Westview folded. The hard drives arrived at Tessa's office 48 hours later. Leo, a man who loved data, locked himself in his office. He emerged 3 days later, his face grim. He set up a monitor in Tessa's conference room. "Here," he said, pointing to the screen. The footage was grainy, time-stamped. "This is the controlled medication room on the cardiac floor. Access is by keycard only. Here is Vanessa, talking to a specific floor nurse. They seem friendly." He fast-forwarded. "Here she is again. 2 hours later. Same nurse." The nurse swipes her card, and they both go into the medication room. He paused the video, his finger on the timestamp. This matches, to the minute, the first time the anticoagulant dosage was accessed in the system log. It happened twice more. Each time, Vanessa entered that secured room with that same nurse, and each time, a change was logged in Daniel's medication file. Tessa stared at the screen. Then she shut off the monitor. She turned to me, her face serious. "Maggie, we have a choice. It's a hard one." She stood up, pacing the room. "One, I take this entire file, the money from Suncrest, the land deal, the medical logs, this footage, and I walk it into the district attorney's office. It becomes a criminal investigation. But the DA will move slowly, carefully. They will take precedence. Our civil case, the fight for Harlow Ridge, will be frozen, possibly for years, pending the outcome of the criminal trial. In that time, Suncrest's lawyers will file motion after motion. They could bankrupt you. Or, I whispered. Or two, she said. We keep this as our trump card. We proceed with the civil case as planned. We use this footage, this medical evidence, as the ultimate leverage, not to prove murder in a civil court, but to prove a pattern of malicious behavior so toxic that no judge will believe a word she says. We can force her and Suncrest into a total, unconditional surrender. We save the land, quickly and decisively. It was a terrible choice. Justice for Daniel, or justice for his land. Punish the woman who may have killed my son, or protect the legacy she was trying to steal. I looked at Tessa, the hard choice settling in my gut. I knew what Daniel would have wanted. He had changed his will to protect the ridge. That was his last act. I had to see it through. We use it as leverage, I said, my voice hoarse. We save Harlow Ridge first. But as I said it, I knew I could not let the other part go. But I won't bury it. Tessa, I added. Not completely. That night, I sat at my own desk. I copied every file Leo had found. The bank transfers, the system logs, the nurse's report. I put it all in a plain manila envelope. I knew a man in the DA's investigations unit, an old friend of my husband's, a man named Henderson, who was honest, bulldog stubborn, and approaching retirement. I addressed the package to his home. No return address. I was planting a seed. The Civil War would come first, but the criminal investigation would be waiting, quietly, in the good soil of an honest man's conscience. The day of the first hearing, the Willow Creek County Courthouse was a circus. The small courtroom was packed, standing room only. Suncrest Development sponsored half the projects in this town, from the high school football stadium to the summer rodeo. The local press smelled blood in the water, and they were all here to see the local giant stumble, or to watch the crazy old woman get put in her place. Vanessa's lawyer, a man named Colin Reddick with a booming voice and an aggressive, expensive suit, opened the proceedings. He was here to support Vanessa's claim of undue influence. "Your Honour," he thundered, "we will show that Margaret Harlow, for years, has operated as a pathologically controlling mother. She smothered her son, Daniel, isolating him on that ranch, poisoning him against his own wife, and preventing him from making his own decisions, all to serve her own selfish, backwards attachment to a piece of dirt." He painted a picture of Daniel as a weak, sickly man, and me as a manipulative crone who had forced a pen into his hand on his deathbed. When it was Tessa's turn, she was the opposite. She was calm, precise, and surgical. She did not raise her voice. She simply presented facts. "Your Honour, Mr. Reddick's portrayal is fiction. The facts are these: Daniel Harlow left Harlow Ridge at age 18 for college. He worked in Denver for nearly 10 years. He met and married Vanessa there. He returned to Willow Creek voluntarily only after his father's death, to help his mother. Yes, but also to co-manage the Green Spur Co., a business he loved, far from being isolated. Daniel was a respected community member. He was not controlled. He was protecting his legacy." "Ms. Monroe," the judge interrupted, "do you have anything beyond your own assertions?" "I do, Your Honour," Tessa said. "The defense calls Noah Jensen." A young man in an ill-fitting suit, twisting his hands nervously, walked to the stand. I recognized him from the feed co-op. He worked for Green Spur. Reddick immediately objected. "This is a ranch hand, Your Honour. Irrelevant." "He was also Daniel's friend," Tessa said smoothly. "Mr. Jensen, can you tell the court about a conversation you had with Daniel Harlow approximately 2 months ago at the Rusty Spur?" Noah swallowed, his eyes finding mine for a second. "Dan, Mr. Harlow, he was upset. We were having a beer. He'd had a few. He told me he'd just come from his lawyer's office. He said..." Noah took a deep breath. "He said he had to change his will to protect his mom. He said, 'I have to protect her from Vanessa and those real estate vultures.'" Reddick was on his feet, shouting, "Hearsay vague. This is the rambling of a drunk, repeated by a loyal kid." "It seems Mr. Harlow was worried you might say that," Tessa said, holding up her phone. "Mr. Jensen, do you recognize this text message exchange, sent later that same night?" She projected it onto the court's monitor. It was from Daniel to Noah. "Hey, man, is this too dramatic?" Below it was a picture, a snapshot of a single paragraph typed on a computer screen. It was Article 4, the forfeiture clause. The courtroom was dead silent. Next, Tessa called Bryce Keller. He was smooth as glass, the picture of a professional executive. He denied everything. He had never pressured Vanessa. He had never threatened me. His visit to my home was simply a good faith attempt to mediate a difficult family situation. "So, you have no knowledge," Tessa asked, "of any attempt to intimidate Mrs. Harlow off her land?" "Absolutely not," Keller said. "Suncrest does not conduct business that way." "That's interesting," Tessa said, turning to Leo, who handed her a file. "Mr. Keller, can you confirm this is your vehicle license plate?" Keller's eyes narrowed. It is. And can you explain why GPS data, obtained legally by my investigator, places that vehicle on the county access road bordering Harlow Ridge, parked for approximately 15 minutes, on the exact night and at the exact time a gunshot was fired at Mrs. Harlow's gate and a threatening note was left? Reddick was screaming, improper, inadmissible. But Keller had gone pale. He licked his lips. He looked at the judge, at the reporters scribbling furiously. I may have driven by, but sometimes our people, our local contractors, sometimes they can be a little overzealous. I can't be held responsible for every subcontractor. The admission hung in the air. Overzealous. The judge banged his gavel, calling for order as the room erupted in murmurs. During the mandatory recess, I stood in the hallway, trying to catch my breath. A woman I'd never seen before, dressed in a simple blouse and skirt, approached me. She looked terrified, but determined. Mrs. Harlow. My name is Lila. I'm Vanessa's second cousin. I tensed, expecting another attack. I can't, she whispered, her eyes darting to Vanessa and Reddick, who were huddled in a corner. I can't listen to her play the victim. I was at a family dinner, just before Daniel went into the hospital. She was bragging. She was laughing. She said, "It's almost over. As soon as he's out of recovery, we're selling. And I'm finally kicking that old woman off the land for good. I can't live with myself if I don't say something." I grabbed her hand and pulled her straight to Tessa, who was just coming out of the restroom. Tessa listened, her eyes widening, a predatory glint coming into them. "Can you be on the record?" Tessa asked. Lila nodded. "Yes." "You're on the witness list," Tessa said, already making a note. We were building the systematic plan, piece by piece, right in the courthouse hallway. When the judge called us back in, Reddick was trying to undo the damage from Keller's testimony. He was arguing that this was all a distraction. This case is about one thing: Vanessa Harlow's rightful inheritance, and this ridiculous, vengeful clause in the will. He was getting loud, desperate. And that's when Vanessa, who had been sitting there vibrating with rage, finally snapped. She stood up so fast her chair screeched. "You're damn right it is," she screamed, pointing at me, her mask of the grieving widow completely gone, revealing the raw greed beneath. "He was my husband. That was my future. It's all because of that damn piece of land." Reddick closed his eyes, his shoulders slumping in defeat. Vanessa had just confirmed it, in front of the judge, the press, and God himself. It was, and always had been, about forcing me off the land. She had just publicly validated the very clause she was trying to fight. Sleep was impossible. It was the night before the final summations, the day the judge would likely render his decision. I was walking the length of the old log house, the sound of my own footsteps the only thing on Harlow Ridge. I felt the ghosts of my husband and son in the quiet rooms. I ended up in my husband's study, a room I usually kept closed. I ran my hand over his oak desk, the wood smooth and cool. On impulse, I pulled the deep bottom drawer, the one that always stuck. It scraped open. It was full of old land surveys and tax files, but tucked beneath a bound copy of a water rights case, there was a thick, cream-coloured envelope. I had never seen it before. My husband's neat, architectural script was on the front. It said, "For Maggie." if I am not here to explain. My hands went numb. I sank into his old leather chair and tore the seal. Inside were 2 documents. The first was a legal memorandum, written by him. It was a breakdown of Article 4, the forfeiture clause. He explained the legal precedent, citing specific Colorado state laws that upheld such in terrorem clauses. He detailed how it interacted with probate law. He had highlighted one sentence in blue ink. The trigger is not the success of the action. Maggie. The trigger is the attempt. Any provable action, any email, threat, or contract made with the intent to force you from the land activates the clause. I was astonished by his foresight, but the second document knocked the air from my lungs. It was a handwritten letter on a yellow legal pad. It was Daniel's handwriting. It was dated just weeks before he died. "Mum," it started, "I am writing this and praying you never have to read it. I'm giving it to Dad to keep, just in case. I saw something. I was on the shared laptop, and Vanessa hadn't logged out of her email. I saw a draft. It was to Bryce Keller at Suncrest. She was promising him she could guarantee you would be off the land. She was negotiating her payout. I asked Dad what I could do, how I could protect you if I wasn't here. I had to stop, my breath catching in a sob. He knew. My son knew exactly what he was married to. I forced myself to read the last lines through my tears. Dad is helping me set a trap. It's this sentence in the will. If I am wrong about her, if I'm just paranoid and stressed, then the clause is harmless. It does nothing. But if I am right, Mom, let one sentence in the will be the thing that destroys their whole plan." I did not wait for the sun. I drove to Tessa's apartment in the dark, the envelope clutched in my hand. When she answered the door, her hair mussed from sleep. Her eyes went wide when she saw my face. I did not say a word. I just handed her the letters. She read my husband's legal notes, her expression impressed. Then she read Daniel's letter. The sleepiness vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. "My God," she whispered. "This is it. This is the whole case. Reddick's entire argument is that you manipulated Daniel, that you exerted undue influence. This proves the opposite. This was Daniel's clear, lucid, and premeditated intent. He wasn't coerced by you. He was reacting to Vanessa." The courtroom was packed. Tessa began the day by asking to approach the bench. "Your Honor, the defense has discovered new and critical evidence. We request permission to submit what we are calling the last letter." Reddick shot to his feet, objecting before she had finished. "This is a circus, a desperate, emotional ploy. A letter is hearsay. Your Honor, it holds no legal value and is clearly intended to prejudice the court." Tessa stood firm. "It is the very definition of admissible evidence. Your Honor, it speaks directly to the testator's state of mind and intent. At the time the will was amended, it is the most relevant document in this entire proceeding." The judge called them into his chambers. When he returned, his face was like stone. "Mr. Reddick, your objection is overruled. This court finds these documents foundational to understanding the testator's intent. They are admitted." Reddick was pale, pushed into a corner. He launched his one remaining missile. "The plaintiff," he announced, "calls Dr. Ian Finch." Finch was a slick psychologist from Denver, a hired gun. He testified that, based on his review of Vanessa's private journals and Daniel's medical files, Daniel was likely suffering from severe clinical depression, and was psychologically malleable and highly susceptible to influence from a dominant maternal figure. He was, in short, painting my son as mentally unfit. When it was Tessa's turn, she smiled. The defense calls Dr. Harris. My son's surgeon took the stand. Tessa asked him, Doctor, in your final preoperative consultations with Daniel Harlow, did you find him to be malleable, confused, susceptible? Not at all, Dr. Harris said firmly. He was focused, lucid, and asked highly intelligent questions. He was of perfectly sound mind. Thank you. No further questions, Tessa said. The defense now calls Dr. Elena Reyes. A woman I didn't recognize took the stand. Dr. Reyes, Tessa said, can you please state your relationship to the deceased? I was Daniel Harlow's therapist, she said calmly. He saw me twice a month for the last year. You could have heard a pin drop. Reddick and Vanessa clearly had no idea she existed. Doctor, Tessa said, was Daniel suffering from depression that would make him susceptible to influence? Daniel was navigating complex grief and marital stress, she said, her voice full of quiet authority. He was sad. He was not incompetent. In fact, he was one of the most decisive and clear-headed clients I have had. He was particularly focused on one thing, his moral and legal obligation to protect his mother and his family's land. Tessa had checkmated him. Reddick sat down, his case in ruins. Tessa stood and walked to the center of the room, facing the judge. Your Honor, she said, her voice ringing in the sudden quiet. For this entire trial, the plaintiff has argued that Article 4 was the product of a manipulative mother. They have tried to paint Daniel Harlow as weak, confused, or coerced. She paused, letting the weight of the testimony settle. His own words, and the words of those who actually knew him, prove that is a lie. Daniel Harlow saw the truth. He was not weak. He was smart. And so, let us now look squarely at the clause that Daniel and Daniel alone placed in that will, and let us see who, by her own admission, her own emails, and her own insatiable greed, chose to walk right into that trap. Tessa stood. She asked the judge for permission to read Article 4 one more time, and the courtroom fell into a heavy silence. She read it slowly, her voice clear and cold, emphasizing the trigger. Seeking to force my mother, Margaret Harlow, from Harlow Ridge, or seeking to transfer the land against her will. She then turned to the large monitor. The plaintiff, she said, has been seeking since before Daniel Harlow was even in the hospital. The screen lit up with Vanessa's own words, pulled from emails to Bryce Keller, texts to her cousin Lila, and messages to her friends. I don't care what it takes. I am kicking her out. He's finally gone. Now I just have to get that old woman off the land. She will not be allowed to stay there. I'll see to it. Tessa let the words burn into the air. Your Honor, she said, her voice softening just a fraction. Mr. Reddick has called this clause a trap, a product of my client's manipulation. He is wrong. This clause was not a trap set by Margaret Harlow. It was the only shield a desperate son could forge when he finally, tragically, saw his own wife negotiating to sell his mother's future to the highest bidder. Reddick was on his feet, desperate. Your Honor, the clause is vindictive. It's unreasonable. It is a dead-hand control that should be ruled invalid on principle. Tessa was ready. It is perfectly reasonable, Your Honor, and perfectly legal in the state of Colorado, provided the testator's intent is clear and he was of sound mind. Daniel's own letter, and the testimony of his doctors, proved he was both. This clause is his intent. Then, Tessa played her final, devastating card. She called Leo Kingsley for a brief summation of his report on the Westview medical logs. He did not accuse Vanessa of murder. He did not have to. He methodically presented the timeline. The first payment from Suncrest, the immediate downgrade of Daniel's medical care, the suspicious meetings with the nurse, the footage of Vanessa entering the secure medication room. He simply referred to it as a deeply disturbing pattern of unauthorized interference with a patient's prescribed care. I watched the judge. He stared at the timeline on the screen, and then he looked at Vanessa. His expression, once professionally neutral, was now one of open, cold contempt. Tessa knew she had won. "We are not asking this court to make a criminal finding today," she said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "We trust these specific documents will be of significant interest to the district attorney's office. Today, Your Honor, we are asking for only one thing: that this court honor the last, dying wish of Daniel Harlow." The judge called a 10-minute recess to review his final notes. We sat in the stifling silence. Vanessa was vibrating, her face pale, whispering frantically to Reddick, who looked defeated. Before the judge could even return to the bench, Vanessa suddenly shot to her feet, her chair scraping loudly on the tile. "You're all twisting this," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You're trying to make me into a monster. Yes, I worked with Suncrest, I had to. I was trying to secure a future for us. And he was too weak. And she—" Her hand shot out. A trembling finger pointed right at me. She held him back. She clung to that stupid dirt like a bitter, jealous old witch, and she ruined everything. The judge banged his gavel, his voice booming. "Sit down, Ms. Harlow. Your outburst has done nothing but confirm the testimony presented." He put on his glasses. The room was silent. "This court finds the will dated 2 months prior to Mr. Harlow's death to be valid, and that the testator was of sound mind. The forfeiture clause in Article 4 is clear and legally enforceable." He looked directly at Vanessa, over the rim of his glasses. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, the text messages, the Suncrest contract, the testimony, and indeed, your own admission here today, this court finds that you, Vanessa Harlow, did engage in a clear, systematic, and malicious pattern of seeking to force Margaret Harlow from her home. You have, by your own actions, triggered the clause. You are hereby deemed to have forfeited all rights, titles, and benefits from Daniel Harlow's estate. Permanently." He wasn't finished. "Furthermore, this court voids any and all agreements between Vanessa Harlow and Suncrest Development related to Harlow Ridge. The injunction is made permanent. Margaret Harlow is affirmed as the sole legal owner." "And finally," he said, tapping the medical file, "this court is transferring this entire report to the district attorney's office with my own recommendation for further investigation." It was over. I felt the breath leave my body in a rush. Outside, the courthouse steps were a madhouse. The local news, sensing the scandal, swarmed us. I saw Vanessa, her face a blank mask of shock, as they shoved microphones at her. I saw Bryce Keller, further down the sidewalk, not walking, but fleeing to a black car, disappearing into traffic before a single reporter noticed him. Tessa squeezed my arm and cleared a path to my old pickup truck. I got in, the cab smelling of dust and oil and home. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. I turned the key, the engine rumbling to life, and started the long drive back to the ridge. I could see it in my mind, the sun setting, the light catching the high golden grass. The land was safe. My husband's foresight and my son's love had protected it. It had all been saved by one sentence. The hatred, the greed, the lies, they were all broken. Now, it was up to me to decide how to live with the peace I had just fought so hard to win. Thanks so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from, so please leave a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary. Give this video a like and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.